Buried inside the federal prison system for years, cut off from the outside world, they wanted to explain their actions, not because they were seeking forgiveness from society, but because they felt they had achieved something in their strange prison world that they had never been credited with when living outside prison. They each considered themselves honorable men, at least by jailhouse standards. It was not easy to walk the line that separates convicts and guards at the hothouse. Even small matters had to be handled delicately. One afternoon, I was invited to a routine target practice session outside the prison. I found guards firing at targets that contained life-size silhouettes of a man. Several referred to the targets as inmates, in some cases calling them specific names. I was offered a pistol but declined. The next night, I visited a convict who was drinking homemade hooch in his cell. "You are always asking what this shit tastes like," he said. "Well, come have some." I refused. I felt accepting either offer would make me suspect. I do not know how long I could have contained this balancing act. Knowing a convict is drinking hooch is of little consequence. Knowing that he has a homemade knife hidden in his cell is another matter, particularly if he uses it a few days later to stab an inmate or a guard. The same is true about guards. Shooting a convict target is insignificant, but having a guard tell you how he gave a belligerent convict some thumb therapy, a euphemism for hitting an inmate, makes you squirm. When you are inside the hothouse for a long period, even as an outsider, you soon forget what it's like to be anywhere else. Steel doors clanging closed behind you, hostile guards yapping orders, television rooms dominated by hollering blacks watching sports, white toughs in polka dot gang bandanas pumping iron, mirror polished tile floors, drab walls painted in unvarying chocolate brown and tan, naked white flesh adorned with obscene tattoos, dainty men with shaven legs, dressed in scanty shorts that expose his panties made from jockey shorts, dyed pink and red Kool-Aid, old drunks, high on homemade mash, neurotics, addicts, sexual deviants, fat bikers with acne-like bullet scars. This is the hothouse community. In Leavenworth Penitentiary, a carton of cigarettes is worth stabbing for. Masturbation, pulling your choke, becomes something to brag about. A man's ass gradually seems less repugnant. Events that would be insignificant anywhere else become momentous. While talking with a convicted murderer one night in his cell, I suddenly heard the country singing of Hank Williams Jr. blaring from a radio in the cell next door. As I watched, the murderer excused himself and walked down the tier. The music stopped. Later, the murderer explained that he had retrieved a shank from a nearby hiding place and, after tucking it under his shirt, had confronted his noisy neighbor. "You're disrespecting me," he said. There is no doubt that if the inmate had refused to turn down the radio, the murderer would have, as he said later, run the gears, a reference to the most effective method of stabbing another human being, as in, you slam a shank into his chest, and then you pull up and over, and then down and over, just like shifting gears in a car. It is difficult to peer into such blackness without eventually being sucked inside. While this book focuses on the life of 6 convicts and a handful of prison officials during a 2-year span from July 1987 until July 1989, numerous other guards and inmates were also interviewed. Many of them comments and stories are insignificant. Each day, hundreds of chaotic episodes were played out in the prison, many of them unrelated to the major events and characters in this book. Yet these incidents are the heart of the prison. A fist fight breaks out in the dining hall because one inmate has cut in front of another in the serving line. Someone sets a cell on fire because the inmate living there has failed to pay a gambling debt. A guard discovers a shank hidden inside a candy machine. Interspersed throughout the book are short vignettes under the rubric of the lieutenant's office, or, in the case of interviews, voices. Most of the people mentioned in these episodes play no role in the full-length chapters. They simply appear and then vanish, just as they do in daily life at the hothouse. Some readers may find this disjointedness to be confusing. It is meant to be. The hothouse is an erratic place. Convicts arrive, others are transferred. The inmate who lived in the cell next door for 12 years is gone one morning without explanation. Guards are promoted. they quit, they are fired. A new inmate moves onto the tier and decides to move on you. In such a cauldron, it is often difficult for an observer to understand what he is seeing or to make sense of it. Rules are enforced to show who is the boss, not out of any sense of fairness. Respect can be worth more than your freedom. Convicts do things that seem foolish at first, yet months later make perfect sense. Watching events unfold at the hot house is like trying to solve a puzzle. The answer is always right in front of your eyes, yet you can't see it as long as you study it like Square John. In the hot house, you must suspend much of what you know or have been taught in the outside world and simply let yourself feel the emotions and tensions. Once you stop trying to understand and simply watch, the solution to the puzzle suddenly becomes clear. The key to understanding the hot house is that in an irrational world, irrationality makes sense. Glenn Walters, a psychologist at Leavenworth, was the first to tell me that understanding events in prison is difficult because most of us don't think like criminals. There are only two emotions in here, Walters said, fear and anger. Just remember that everything these inmates do revolves around those two emotions and nothing else. A voice, drug dealer, age 32. The first day I was in prison, two dudes busted in on this guy in the cell next to mine and stuck him 26 times with shanks. He was sitting on the crapper when they killed him, and he couldn't fight back because his pants were wrapped around his legs. Stupid bastard. Anyone who don't know better than to take his legs out of his pants in prison before he sits on the toilet deserves to die. Something you learn in there. Another time, I saw a guy get stuck while he was walking out to the shower wearing rubber thongs. Soon as they hit him, he fell over because the floor was wet and he didn't have any footing. I always go to the shower barefoot. Let me tell you another secret. You know the best time to move on a Square John in the street? I used to do this in New York when I needed a few bucks. Go into a restaurant or bar and wait in the bathroom. You can always be washing your hands when some dude will come in to pee. As soon as he starts, you nail him against the urinal and grab his billfold. Most folks don't know it, but it is physically impossible for a guy who's taking a piss to fight back. Laughs. I'm not bullshitting. I never met anyone who can piss and fight at the same time. It just can't be done.